He walked into the hearing room expecting just another day. He was confident and calm, believing it would all be routine. That changed instantly when Representative Jasmine Crockett started reading aloud a line that would shake everything. In front of the entire country, Kash Patel lost his composure, something no one expected. The morning had started without any sign that things would go wrong. But as the hearing moved forward, the tension quickly began to build. And then came the sentence. Just one sentence and everything shifted. Crockett's delivery wasn't dramatic. It was measured, calm, and pointed. The words she chose were from Patel's own testimony and documents. She didn't raise her voice or try to create a scene. Instead, she let the weight of the words speak for themselves. In a room filled with cameras and lawmakers, silence followed her statement. The members on the committee leaned in while Patel's expression changed slightly. He looked as if he was trying to process what had just been said and how to respond without losing control. The hearing had been scheduled weeks before. It was expected to go over familiar issues, routine questioning, standard answers, and a back and forth that rarely surprised anyone. But Crockett had done her homework. She had reviewed the documents carefully, and when she spoke, she didn't need to shout or accuse. She simply asked Patel to explain something that appeared to contradict earlier statements. The contradiction wasn't minor. It was central to Patel's claims. That's when the atmosphere in the room changed entirely. First, Patel tried to respond calmly. He gave a brief general answer, hoping to move on. But Crockett didn't let that happen. She stayed focused, referencing the specific line and asking for clarification. Her approach was direct but respectful. She didn't interrupt, but she also didn't let him avoid the question. Every time he tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, she returned to that sentence. It was clear that she wanted a straight answer, and that she was prepared to wait for it. Patel grew visibly frustrated. His voice became sharper, his tone more defensive. He insisted that his comments were being misinterpreted, that the context mattered, and that Crockett was twisting his words. But the line she read was plain. It didn't leave much room for misinterpretation. And the more he tried to explain, the more tangled his responses became. Members of the committee started to whisper among themselves. Some leaned back, watching the exchange unfold. Others took notes. Crockett remained composed throughout. It wasn't just about catching Patel in a contradiction. It was about holding him accountable for his statements. Crockett wasn't interested in grandstanding. Her focus was on clarity. She wanted to know whether Patel stood by what he had written, or if he now saw things differently. His answers didn't help his case. The more he spoke, the less clear things became. And as the back and forth continued, the room began to feel heavier, more charged with each moment. The cameras in the room captured everything. Viewers at home could see Patel becoming increasingly agitated, while Crockett stayed steady. She didn't react to his frustration. Instead, she asked again, politely but firmly, for a clear explanation. This time, Patel's response was more emotional. He raised his voice. He questioned Crockett's motives. He suggested the hearing was unfair. But none of that changed the fact that the words she read came from his own records. Representative Crockett didn't flinch. She kept her expression neutral and quietly turned to the next page in her folder. "Mr. Patel," she said evenly, "you mentioned that no written communication took place between you and Mr. Devlin before the March 14th briefing. However, we have a dated memo from March 13th sent from your personal email to his private inbox. It contains a detailed reference to that same briefing." There was a subtle pause in the room. Patel looked briefly at his attorney, then straightened in his chair. "That's not accurate," he said. "That email must be wrongly linked to me." His voice had lost its earlier ease. Still, Crockett kept her tone steady. She read directly from the email. The language was specific and time-stamped. It had been sent to 2 other staffers. His name was on the signature line. Behind Crockett, her aide Brenda Moreno maintained her focus on Patel's lawyer, who had leaned forward, his jaw tight. Chairman DuPont broke in and asked for clarification. Patel tried to explain, but the fluency was gone. His earlier rhythm had cracked. He offered vague explanations about how drafts might have been sent by a team member, but none of it directly addressed the signature. Crockett stayed calm. She pointed out that the font, metadata, and signature matched 3 other emails from Patel's account. The room grew more attentive. A few heads turned in the gallery. Patel's next words came quickly. "I don't recall signing that." Crockett responded just as swiftly. "Good thing we're not relying on memory," she said, setting the email on the table. Then she moved on. Brenda handed her another document. This one in color. "This is a screenshot," Crockett said, "of your encrypted text exchange with Mr. Devlin. The day after the memo, you wrote, and I quote, that memo's locked, clean, and off the radar, just like we said." Patel gave a brief, tense laugh. "Screenshots now? Really?" Crockett didn't react. "Are you disputing the content?" she asked. "I'm saying it's informal back and forth," Patel replied. "You're trying to turn it into a political spectacle." Crockett, replied plainly. It was about a federal intelligence briefing, not casual conversation. The members who had earlier looked disinterested were now paying attention. Chairman Dupont adjusted his glasses. He reminded Patel of his Fifth Amendment rights, but noted that the committee took perjury seriously. The word hung in the air like smoke. Patel's jaw tensed. "There's no perjury," he said through clenched teeth. "This is a smear campaign. You're here because the facts don't align," Crockett replied. "The public deserves answers." Cameras zoomed in as Patel looked down, seemingly unsure of what to say. His lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Patel didn't speak. He just nodded once. Brenda passed over another paper. This time it was even more direct. "This exchange," Crockett said, "mentions keeping communication off the radar." Patel started to respond, but Crockett continued. "It wasn't a lunch order, Mr. Patel. It was sensitive government material." The chairman allowed the line of questioning to continue. Patel looked rattled. His voice had changed. When he spoke again, it was defensive. "There's no conspiracy. That memo was a draft. It didn't go anywhere." Crockett leaned forward slightly. "Then why did you deny its existence under oath?" His lawyer finally intervened. "Objection to the characterization." Crockett didn't look away. "This isn't a courtroom. These are facts." Patel's silence was telling. "You knew. This wouldn't stay hidden," Crockett said quietly. "You just didn't expect anyone to verify it." Before anyone could respond, Chairman Dupont called for a brief recess, and that's when the real tension started to build behind closed doors. As soon as the chairman gavelled the session into pause, Patel stood up from his seat. He didn't wait for his lawyer, nor did he wait for cameras to cut away. He removed his microphone, muttered something to himself, and walked quickly toward a back room reserved for witness consultations. His lawyer followed, speaking quietly but urgently. Cameras caught Patel's face as he passed the chairwoman's desk, tight-lipped, flushed, and visibly shaken. Inside the consultation room, the door closed firmly behind them. No cameras, no microphones. But according to 2 aides who stood nearby, Patel's voice was clearly audible. "What is happening out there?" he demanded. "How did she even get that memo? That was supposed to be buried. I know it was buried." His lawyer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a laptop and pulled up an internal server log. After a moment of silence, he spoke in a low voice. "Someone gave it to her," he said, pointing to a specific entry. "This isn't public data. It came from the inside." Patel's eyes narrowed. "You think Devlin flipped?" The lawyer shook his head slightly. "That doesn't matter. Right now, what matters is stopping this before she brings out anything else." Meanwhile, back inside the chamber, Jasmine Crockett remained in her seat. She hadn't checked her phone once. Brenda leaned over and whispered, "That got to him." Crockett nodded slightly. "He's hiding more," she said. Across the room, staffers spoke quietly, and members glanced at their devices. Though the hearing was only halfway through, it had already drawn attention from nearly every political journalist in the building. The hashtag, #JasPatelsCrockett, started trending within minutes. News outlets scrambled to adjust coverage. On TikTok, short clips of Patel's stunned expressions began circulating, captioned with sharp commentary. 15 minutes later, The hearing resumed. Patel re-entered the room, this time walking more slowly. The energy in his stride had faded. He looked like someone who had just finished a difficult conversation. He took his seat, but the earlier sense of control was gone. Crockett barely acknowledged him. "Mr. Patel," she began, "let's return to your earlier claim that the memo was only a draft and didn't go anywhere. Here is Mr. Devlin's reply sent 2 hours after receiving your message. It reads, and I quote, 'Understood. I'll make sure the committee never sees this version.'" Patel's eyes shifted toward his lawyer but received no response. He exhaled slowly. "That doesn't prove anything," he said. "It's being misread." Crockett didn't hesitate. "Intent is for juries to interpret. We're asking you to explain what actually happened. That response doesn't suggest openness." Patel's voice cracked slightly. "It's all being taken out of context." Crockett raised her brow. "You keep saying that, but you haven't offered any real context. What is the missing piece we're not seeing?" "Some members, murdered." Chairman DuPont tapped his gavel. Patel's frustration grew. "You're not investigating, you're performing. This is all just for your supporters." Crockett replied, "Is that your final statement?" Patel shot back, "This is political theater." That word, theater, caught attention. Chairman DuPont leaned forward. "Mr. Patel, please stick to the factual matters." But Patel kept going. "You've already made up your mind. You think you can trap me with emails and messages? I've served under 2 administrations. I've attended more classified briefings than anyone here. You think a few screenshots are enough?" Crockett set her papers down. "It's not the screenshots. It's your own words. On record, on camera. If you had been transparent, none of this would matter." The tension in the hearing room thickened. Patel's hand tightened around the edge of the table, and Chairman DuPont adjusted in his seat. Everyone in the room felt the shift. "I've had enough," Patel said, his voice louder now. "You've made up your mind, and I'm not going to sit here while you twist private conversations to fit your version of events." He stood, not in anger but deliberately. His lawyer followed. Chairman DuPont quickly reminded him he was still under obligation to remain until excused by the committee. But Patel kept walking, coat in hand, exiting the chamber without another. As he left, one of Crockett's aides quietly slid a folder across the table. Jasmine opened it calmly. Inside were new documents, and when she glanced through them, her expression changed. Not visibly shaken, but more resolved. Chairman DuPont called a short recess while legal advisors decided how to move forward. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Patel's exit, the confusion in the room, and Jasmine's steady response. Almost instantly, Patel's walkout became national news. Within minutes, social media lit up. Hashtags like "Sarn Patel walks out" and "Crockett documents" spread quickly. At a Starbucks in Seattle, 2 students watching the live feed turned their phones toward each other. "Who just leaves a hearing like that?" one asked. In Arizona, a man at a gas station replayed the moment again and again. The hearing had shifted from policy questions to public spectacle. On television, legal analysts began offering immediate reactions. Some saw Patel's departure as a breakdown. Others viewed it as proof that the documents had weight. Either way, the story was already out of Patel's control. Back in the hearing room, Jasmine stayed seated. She whispered something to Brenda, who nodded. A younger aide named Derek Flores stood nearby, visibly tense. "I don't want to release this unless he returns," Jasmine said, tapping the folder. "But if he doesn't, we proceed." Brenda nodded again. "He will. His lawyer knows this looks bad." Another 10 minutes passed, then 20. During that time, 2 major networks switched to full live coverage. This wasn't the usual C-SPAN stream. It was prime time. Cable anchors broke into their programming to explain what was unfolding. One legal expert put it bluntly: "If the next documents are accurate, Mr. Patel may need more than legal defense. He may need a deal." Outside the hearing room, Patel's attorney paced the hallway. 2 assistants worked beside him, one on a phone call, the other on a laptop. "He has to come back," the attorney muttered. "If she has more and he's not there to respond, this could spiral." "Where is he?" one assistant asked. "In a car 2 blocks away," the other answered. "Says he needs a minute." He doesn't have a minute, the lawyer replied. Inside, Crockett stood and asked to officially resume the session. Patel's chair was still empty. She didn't hesitate. We've confirmed the contents of this document with legal counsel and independent analysts, she said. It's a memo from Patel's personal server dated March 16th. The subject, Deconfliction Plan, Avoid Traceable Channels. Brenda displayed the memo on a screen. It outlines efforts to bypass exposure under federal transparency laws, Crockett continued, including burner phones, encrypted apps, and non-standard scheduling methods. She turned to the empty chair. This was authored 2 days after Patel testified that no such tactics were used. Outside, crowds had begun to gather, watching in real time. But even they didn't know the biggest revelation hadn't yet been shared. 15 minutes after Crockett introduced the deconfliction memo, Kash Patel returned. This time there was no dramatic entrance. He walked in through a side door, coat off, his expression blank. The confidence was gone. He looked like someone who had just been told that events were no longer under his control. The chairman didn't wait for formalities. Mr. Patel, he said, while you were absent, the committee reviewed additional documents. You may now respond. Patel leaned toward the microphone, his voice lower than before. I'd like to clarify a few points, he said. Some of the language used in those documents wasn't meant to be interpreted literally. Crockett raised her head. So you're saying it was metaphor? I'm saying that in my position we often use informal phrasing when assessing risks, he replied. She didn't look away. Burner phones and encrypted scheduling to avoid discovery aren't casual phrases. Earlier, Patel had claimed no written communications existed. Now, confronted with evidence, his stance was shifting. He turned to his lawyer. Do I have to answer questions framed like that? He asked. His lawyer remained silent. Chairman DuPont answered instead. Yes, Mr. Patel, you are under oath. Something changed in Patel's posture. He no longer appeared defensive, just tired. He leaned in again. I followed a framework, he said. A playbook, one we all knew, one that had worked before. A quiet ripple moved through the room. Jasmine's grip on her pen tightened slightly. And who is we, Mr. Patel? He paused. Then, the policy team, at least 5 of us, were, you told to keep communications off the record? He hesitated before answering. Yes. By whom? He looked down. I'd prefer not to say here. Jasmine didn't push further, yet. But the shift in the room was clear. This was no longer a policy hearing. It had become a matter of potential accountability. Outside, coverage on cable news reflected the gravity of his admissions. Graphics flashed across screens. Patel confirms. Off-record communications. Analysts reacted in real time. In one middle school classroom in Spokane, a teacher paused her lesson to show the live feed. This, she told her students, is how government oversight is supposed to function. Back in the hearing room, Crockett leaned forward. We'll pause here. Not because you've provided full answers, but because I want your full attention for the next document. Brenda tapped a keyboard, and a screenshot appeared on the screen behind them. A black background with white text, a short message chain. The text read, Make sure we don't mention it in email. If she asks, deny it, she won't follow up. Patel stared at the screen silently. I didn't write that, he said. Crockett didn't blink. It came from your phone. It was spoofed. Or maybe I don't remember, I never sent that. Brenda presented a metadata report. The unique device identifier matches your phone. The timestamp aligns with your committee portal login. Patel rubbed his face. This is insane, I didn't send that. Then help us understand who did, Jasmine said calmly. He paused again. I want a lawyer. You already have one. I want another. Chairman DuPont leaned forward. Then, this hearing is suspended for legal consultation. The room didn't erupt, but the energy shifted instantly. Conversations buzzed among reporters and staffers. Brenda leaned toward Jasmine. That wasn't the most damaging part. I know, Jasmine replied, her tone steady. That's still coming. As the hearing room emptied for legal consultation, reporters raced to file updates. Outside, satellite trucks spun into action. Patel's team had requested a pause, but the public conversation had already moved ahead. Social media was flooded with reactions, but now radio, podcasts, and morning television began weighing in. What had started as a standard hearing was now a national event. People weren't just debating politics, they were questioning credibility, trust, and transparency. Inside, a quiet room nearby, Patel's legal team sat in a circle. One aide whispered, "There's audio now, they haven't played it yet." Patel sat still, saying nothing. His lawyer leaned closer. "You have one chance to respond before they do." Back in the chamber, Jasmine Crockett remained at her seat, focused. She held a printed transcript of the audio file. Her jaw was tight, not out of anger, but focus. Brenda leaned in, voice low. "Are we playing it now?" Jasmine shook her head. "We wait until the chairman reconvenes. It needs to be on the record." It took nearly an hour for everyone to return to their seats. Members trickled back in slowly, avoiding cameras. Staffers from nearby offices squeezed in, hoping to catch what came next. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes on the dais. Chairman Dupont gavelled 3 times. "We resume with additional evidence submitted by Representative Crockett." "Proceed." Jasmine adjusted her microphone. "What you are about to hear," she said, "was recorded during an internal training session conducted via Zoom last year. Mr. Patel, during your time as senior advisor, you led this meeting. You discussed communication practices and protocol. Is that accurate?" Patel didn't look up. "If you say it's from that session, I won't deny it." "Good," Jasmine replied. "We've clipped a short segment, 45 seconds. Brenda dimmed the lights slightly and played the clip. Patel's voice filled the room, clear, casual, and self-assured. "Keep comms clean. If there's anything that might raise flags, use Signal, never email. And if questions come later, deny knowledge unless you're cornered." A soft gasp followed, not loud, but noticeable. People weren't shocked by the words themselves, but by hearing them spoken so plainly. Jasmine waited a moment, then played another snippet. "We don't write this stuff down. That's how people get pulled into hearings. If you want cover, use private channels. If you want risk, go formal. Your choice." Patel kept his eyes down. His lawyer whispered something again, but Patel didn't move. Chairman Dupont leaned forward. "Mr. Patel, is that your voice?" "Yes," Patel answered quietly. "Do you retract any of those statements?" "No." Jasmine leaned in. "Let the record show these were not casual remarks, these were instructions. From someone with security clearance, from someone who understood the risks." Patel remained silent. The chairman gavelled again. "This hearing will now move into extended review. Testimony will be forwarded to oversight, and legal coordination with the Department of Justice will proceed." Outside, live coverage reflected the shift. This was no longer just about ethics. It was now a legal matter. Inside, Jasmine whispered to Brenda, "We weren't even looking for that clip." Brenda blinked. "So how'd we get it?" "It came in anonymously," Jasmine said. "Someone sent it directly. That changed everything. Whoever had leaked the audio had known what it would do, and sent it anyway." 2 weeks before the hearing, far from the spotlight, a staffer named Melinda Kash had been working in the basement archives of the Intelligence Subcommittee offices. At 28, she wasn't in a high-profile role. Her work mostly involved reviewing old documents, catching clerical errors, and updating long-ignored files. It was quiet work, repetitive but necessary. And she had a habit. She listened. One afternoon, she overheard 2 staffers joking about something called the ghost drive, a USB device that, officially, didn't exist. They laughed, calling it a relic from a past admin, but Melinda didn't laugh. She remembered the term W staff line, which came up in their conversation. Later, she searched through past entries. It only appeared in a few places, but each reference pointed back to Patel's inbox. That was the thread she followed, quietly, carefully, and when she pulled on it, the connections began to surface. She didn't alert a supervisor. She didn't tell friends. She gathered what she could, verified the material, and printed it out. Then she placed it in an unmarked envelope. It sat in her apartment for 4 days before she walked into Representative Crockett's district office in Dallas on a day off and handed it to a staffer. All she said was, "Please make sure she sees this." Back in Washington, Jasmine had no idea who sent the material, but it arrived clean, unaltered, original, and outside standard congressional systems. Her legal team ran it through independent verification. All of it checked out. Even the audio clip arrived separately, encrypted and untraceable, but unmistakably Patel's voice. Whoever sent it knew what it would do and chose to send it anyway. Now, in the aftermath of Patel's public testimony and breakdown, Jasmine sat in her office. A whiteboard behind her was covered with names, dates, and call logs. Brenda paced the floor, a legal pad in hand. If he said 5 people were involved, and we've only confirmed 1, who else is connected to this? He didn't plan this alone, Jasmine said. He had help, and not just from aides. He mentioned a playbook, Brenda added. Someone had to write it. Do you think Devlin flips? If he thinks he's about to be left on? His own. Yes. Elsewhere, in a quiet brownstone near Arlington, Rob Devlin sat at a desk. In his mid-40s, he had worked across several agencies. His reputation was subtle, not high profile, but dependable. He was known as someone who could streamline problems before they turned into headlines. On the desk in front of him sat a burner phone. It buzzed once. An unknown number. 1 word. Tomorrow. Devlin didn't react right away. He didn't reach for the phone or respond. He just exhaled slowly. Whatever was coming, he understood that it had already begun, and it wasn't going to be stopped now. The next morning, Jasmine received another anonymous envelope. This time it contained only 1 page. Bold black text read, "Check your server logs from March 17th. You missed something." Brenda read it over her shoulder. "They're still sending more? Or testing us? Why now?" "Because someone assumed Patel would take the fall quietly," Jasmine said. "But when he didn't, they panicked." That evening she took a long drive through Bethesda. Not for any specific reason, just to think. Somewhere between the quiet streets and low radio hum, she realized this wasn't about one man or one mistake. It was something deeper, something systemic, and someone wanted it to stay hidden until the wrong person looked too closely. The Patel hearing didn't just end with headlines and social media buzz. It turned into something larger, something that stayed with people, not just because of the documents or even the audio. What lingered was the silence, that brief moment. After the clip played, when Patel admitted the voice was his and had no response, that pause traveled further than any commentary could. Clips of that moment were shared across platforms. 30 seconds of stillness, of quiet recognition, where someone in power could no longer explain away the truth. In Sacramento, an elderly woman wrote a letter to her congressman. It was the first time she'd done so in 2 decades. She ended it simply, "I don't know law, but I know when someone's hiding something. We deserve better." In Oklahoma City, a group of engineering students started a petition. They weren't political science majors, but the hearing had caught their attention. They began calling for improved transparency rules for congressional witnesses. They hadn't planned to get involved, but something about that hearing stuck with them. Even within Patel's own circle, cracks appeared. A former staffer came forward, stating that off-the-record communication had been routine for years, and that everyone knew the lines not to cross, but also how to step around them. The difference this time? Someone asked the right question, at the right moment. There was no celebration from Jasmine Crockett. She didn't book interviews or issue public statements. When reporters stopped her outside her office the following Friday, she simply said, "I'm glad the truth got the microphone." That was all, but it was enough. That sentence began appearing on social media bios, printed on shirts, and repeated in classrooms and civic events. It resonated, not because it was loud, but because it was true. Moments like this don't end when a hearing adjourns. They stretch. They live on through the questions they spark. Questions like, why is it so easy to hide things in government? Who decides what counts as truth? And who's making sure someone is watching those in power? Somewhere in Maryland, Inside a secure federal building, an internal audit was quietly launched. It wasn't public, not yet, but investigators began. Compiling names, people who had sent messages from personal accounts, people who received encrypted instructions. No one expected those records to be checked, but now someone was checking. In a small DC apartment, Melinda Kash went back to her routine. She didn't want recognition. She didn't want credit. She still worked the same job, walking through halls where no one knew what she had done. That didn't bother her. She hadn't acted for praise. She had done it because someone needed to. Because some jobs, even the quiet ones, matter. As for Patel, he withdrew from the spotlight. There were no press conferences, no rebuttals. His lawyer issued a generic statement about misunderstanding and misinterpretation. It didn't gain much attention. There were rumors of legal consequences. Maybe there would be, maybe not. But what mattered wasn't what happened to Patel. It was what his actions revealed. Because people in power often believe no one is watching. They count on public distraction, on systems too complex for scrutiny. They rely on speaking confidently, even when the facts don't align. But sometimes someone listens. Sometimes someone presses. And when they do, the silence that follows speaks louder than any defense. So if this story made you pause, even for a moment, subscribe. Because we're not done watching, and we're definitely not done asking.